What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Hey, I need to tell you something.
Oh, God, what is it?
Some time ago, we did an ad episode where we talked about how we were going to get better with our ads.
I was wondering where you were going.
Yeah.
We're so shit at the ads.
That's what we said. We said, we're so shit, we're going to get better, and we just didn't.
We don't. We're so full of shit. All right, well, here they are. We got 5 sponsors currently.
All right, who are they? Read
First
them
is
out.
the OG, the Einzelwiener.
Oh, that knob.
The buffhead.
Yeah.
No, he's the OG. He's been with us
He's
since the
good.
start.
No, he's good.
He
He's
is
good.
going to
He's a
sell
good
you
boy.
whatever you need.
Yep.
He'll get it. What you should do is contact Jason from Einswick Dog Queer with some peculiar product, tell him you want it, and make him get it in and sell
Yeah.
it to you. Even if you could buy it somewhere else, just make sure he gets it in for you.
Just make that bastard work.
But in all honesty, I'd say 90% of my shit comes from him, and it's all the best stuff.
I did see some feedback on our forum where somebody was really intrigued about your handler package, the one that you got from Jason. Obviously, it works. Like,
Yeah, it's
people are
good.
paying attention to the
Yeah, the
ads.
leashes
That's
are good.
great. Even though we're shit at this, we do a terrible job of actually trying to keep things updated. It's great to see that the people who are investing in our show are actually getting some leeway.
Yep. Mate, I've heard that your wife sells some canine products.
My wife is doing great guns at the moment. I said before that she's been supported terrifically in the United States, which has been good, but I will swing that back home and say that so many more people in Australia are doing it. And it's great to see, like, there are people finally in the sporting dog world who are starting to prioritize nutrition for their dogs. And I know them. I can see them when Narelle comes in and says, oh, guess who bought some product off me for the first time. So
Are you saying there's no patient confidentiality?
no, there's
You're
patient
aware-
confidentiality.
Oh, sorry.
It's just a
purchaser
mailing list.
confidentiality.
Well, it's a mailing list.
Are you aware my dog is taking pee, collagen, and what's the other thing he takes?
Antonol.
Antonol.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on that.
Antonol is not Narelle's business, but I've got to do a shout out for Antonol. They are absolutely fantastic. They're very supportive of our show. Whenever we've done seminars and so forth, they have been first to dip their hand in their pocket. They are very generous with their product. But let me just say, all that aside, their generosity and their advertising and marketing, let me just say on the other side of that, their product is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it does work. It's very beneficial.
For sure.
It's one of those things where they say Antonol for every dog every day. I totally agree with that. Narelle has even supported that. When people have asked them about her product, she says the 2 things that I would absolutely give to you is Antonol and her Gut Protect formula.
Yeah, right.
Gut Protect is like her holy grail of
Like
her
the
whole
flagship
range.
of the range.
This is not me market talking, okay? Because
This is an ad.
This is an ad, but this is not me doing marketing.
But we've already pointed out we're shit at ads.
I know. Of all the things that she sells, and she sells some killer product, but the one thing that she does sell, which I absolutely agree with her, every dog should have this product, is the Gut Protect.
Really?
100%. It's nothing that they need for being sick. It's something that they need to do just to maintain great gut balance.
Okay.
And gut balance is like mental health. It's one of those things that you absolutely want to get control around. So products like Antonol, great for every day. Gut Protect, great for every day. There's other products that aren't even related to hers called Rosehip Vital and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic for dogs to be on every sort of day. But I know there's other people we need to talk about. If you want to learn more about Narelle's products, go to our website, canineseuticals.com. I think it's
You'll figure it out.
It's .com or .com.au. It's one of those.
No one
but-
types that shit anyway. Everyone just Googles it and
Yeah,
then goes,
just Google it.
yeah.
You'll find it.
Hey,
Yeah.
George Kittredge, I reckon we should get him on the show.
We should have George Kittredge on the show.
Yeah.
Not only is he devilishly handsome,
Yep.
but he's got a fantastic, one-of-a-kind product that I've never seen replicated anywhere in the world. You and me were getting a car ride by him. We got to see the prototype firsthand.
And then his bike got stolen with the prototype on it.
did,
Remember that?
yes.
Yeah. But anyway, George has Rowdy Hound Dog Box. And
Yes.
so it's a crate that goes on the back of your motorbike so that your dog can go everywhere with you. And
Yeah.
it's cool as shit. It's a great idea. You should
Yeah.
totally get one. Tailored Canines in Canada.
Yeah,
Do you know that Taylor from Tailored Canines is hosting Jazz Whiting later in the year?
I do know that. Yes,
Yes.
I saw the ad. Very good.
Yep.
Not
So
only is she doing great stuff with her tailored canine,
her training business.
her training business, but she's also getting a fantastic trainer over there to help with her tailored training.
She is. And finally, Barbara de Groot
The sugar mama from the Heart Dog
From the
Training.
Heart Dog Training.
Just fucking throws cash at us.
Just supports the show. God bless her.
Yeah. I think later on in the year when Narelle and I are over doing a seminar with Melanie Benware, Barbara de Groot is coming over.
Wonderful.
I think she has put down a like, and I said, you better come, sugar mama, and she gave me a thumbs up. So hopefully she's going to be there and I can give her some love to repay us for all the kindness and support that she's thrown at us and ask nothing in return.
All right. That's our ad.
Yeah.
That one's good to go for at least another 4 years. You'll hear from us then.
Before we kick off the show, a good friend of TCP went to the effort of recording their answer to the question we asked back in episode 300, and it wasn't included. So here it is. Please welcome to the stage the Tiger Prince, Casey Kanan.
Hey, my name's Casey Kanan. I'm the owner of Lone Star Animal Behavior and training director at Big Show PSA in Queensland, Australia. I started out training wild animals in the circus, elephants, lions, and tigers, things like that. Actually, I started out training dogs in the circus. I did that for probably 30 years, and then during COVID, I started a dog training business because the exotic animal work kind of went on pause for a while, and I saw everyone was getting COVID dogs and whatnot, and since then, it's just kind of grown into a thing. My answer to that question, if I could go back to a particular point in time in my career, would probably be all the way back towards the beginning when I trained the first dog that I ever trained. And mostly because growing up on the circus, there were all kinds of really good animal trainers from all over the world and all very different in their methods. Some of them were very compulsive. Some of them were very, you would almost say, force-free, because it's teaching the animals to do something most of the time rather than not to do something. So I got to see quite a variety of those things. When I was 11 years old, I got this dog named Goober. I got him from the pound. He was a Beagle, Collie, Bitsa cross, something, pretty much a 40-pound black and tan dog. I decided I was going to teach him to do circus tricks, and the circus already had wonderful dog act with about 12 dogs. That dog trainer was a really good dog trainer, but he was definitely, it was more learning by negative reinforcement, just pressure into behaviors. And as an 11-year-old kid watching him train his dogs, I probably didn't get the concept of that very well. And so I would take my dog Goober every day. I would take him into the tent in the morning when no one else was using the ring, and I would try to teach him to do these circus tricks. And I would be dragging him onto pedestals, dragging him through hoops. He wasn't much of a willing participant for any of it. Looking back, I feel like I still want to apologize to Goober for that. That was the beginning, thankfully. And then one day, one of the other trainers on the show, the German guy that actually owned the circus, who was a really good animal trainer, he came in and he just stood there watching me. And I was really proud of myself because the dog had learned how to do a couple of things. He saw me trying to drag the dog through a hula hoop to get it to jump through, and he just said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm teaching him to jump through a hoop." And he goes, "Why would you be doing it like that?" He goes, "That dog would do anything in the world for you for a hot dog, and you would never have to touch it. You could literally just show it a hot dog." And he was explaining to me how to lure an animal. I didn't understand it at that age. So he went and got a hot dog, and he came back in, thankfully, and he spent 20 minutes just kind of explaining to me how to positively reinforce an animal as opposed to just using negative reinforcement to get them to do something. And I remember just being mind blown, like I couldn't believe that would actually work. And then I did that for a few weeks and quite obviously could see that it worked. I taught Goober hundreds of tricks. Like he did every trick a circus dog could ever do. It was probably one of the best dogs I ever had because I had, as an 11-year-old kid, I had plenty of time to put work in and I was always teaching him something. But that moment when I kind of understood, that was actually when I decided that was what I was going to do when I grew up, was train animals. Because honestly, dragging him around, trying to get him to do things wasn't that much fun. I was very frustrated all the time. But when I figured out that I didn't have to actually make him do anything. He would willingly do a lot of things. It was a game changer, and I went on to do that for 30 years and still do it to this day. And so I'd probably go back to that point in my career just so I could be with that dog some more and be around Wayne, the guy that taught me. I worked for him for many years, and he taught me how to do a lot of things with animals. And he later on got killed by a tiger, unfortunately, but he was kind of the beginning of my career. So it'd be great if I could go back to that point in time.
And now, without further ado, here's the show.
Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined in studio for episode 301 by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Isn't it amazing? 301 episodes. I know I said that about 300, but also what was amazing was that tribute Brent Dry put together.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool. I really appreciated him taking the time to do that.
I felt some big feels when I was listening to all that. I don't think I've ever taken for granted what we've done, because there's a lot of people who have expressed genuine appreciation. But seeing that medley of people, their kind and loving words, that outpouring of love to you and I for taking the time to do it all, it really hit home to me that this is something special for a lot of people. And it grew beyond you and me a long time ago. It became a community thing. That's the thing I love about this, is that it became something organic, and it became something that spread like wildfire, especially amongst the balance trainers, because we always feel like we're on the back foot of something all the time. We always feel like we're losing ground. We always feel like it's us that has to give up something. And we're not wrong. It's true. Like if we go and sit down with some plus R trainers and so forth, it's not them who have to give up anything. It's us. It always is. It's always going to be. It's always us that's going to have to negotiate down to placate the conversation. And that's not a piss and moan session. That's just a fact. It is just the way things are. I don't see them giving up anything. In fact, I just see the demands for us to always give something up. And that's why I feel that it's an important place for you, me, and everybody else that's involved in this community to still be able to come together and to be able to talk about this sort of thing and wrestle with the semantics behind it, because I really feel the corruption around me when you look at the political landscape, how easily tradable we are. I've talked about that so many times, but it frustrates me to no end. Not just me, countless thousands and thousands of people involved in our industry are just bewildered with the fact that this can go on around us, like this open air corruption that can be so blatant in public arenas. But then when I see that tribute video and all the wonderful support and what it's meant to people and the words that they say to us publicly or privately, it reinvigorates me when I feel like, oh man, I've been beaten into a corner. There's just some days I just feel like there's just not much left. But that really does inspire me. It really picked my spirits up. And Brent and everybody who took the time to appear on that, there's so many of you and some extremely high profile people in the industry.
Yeah.
Such appreciation.
Yeah, for sure. It was wonderful to watch. All right, that's enough of us talking about ourselves. We are continuing to use your comments that is from a Facebook post from a long time ago, back in April.
Yes.
We're continuing to use those to trigger conversation. We're working through a list of those. And this question comes from TK McVicker. Says, how do we talk about positive punishment and stop it being a dirty little secret, especially compared to negative punishment and the disconnection with the reality that many people use negative punishment, but try to frame it as something else other than punishment? Add-on question, why do you think people find throwing a bucket of water more acceptable positive punishment, yet an e-collar stim is horrendous and abuse, and how can we address the issue?
For a long time that I've been involved in the industry, there was so many times where positive punishment never really came up in a conversation. You just did what you needed to do. You resolved the issue. I would say, as we've uncovered here and we've discussed many times with our colleagues in the industry, that sometimes we're confused about what quadrant we're actually in. There's probably times where we've thought that we're doing positive punishment, and we generally find that we're more likely to have been doing something like negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
But misplacing and mislabeling or misidentifying what we're actually doing. However, we do know that positive punishment exists. I've used it. I still use it. I will continue to use it because I believe that everything has its place. There is an effective measure of control behind it as well when it's used appropriately. Why it doesn't come up well in public is because it's often seen as something that's cruel to the dog, or that the dog has such a high level of aversive responses to it that why would you need to do it when there are other options? When you have concluded that it's time to use positive punishment, I think those options are off the table, especially for professional trainers. The one area where I keep coming back to, this is going to be a hill that I die on. I'm fucking convinced of this. People are talking about positive punishment when they're confused with abuse. That's the problem. That keeps coming back as the problem. Now that I'm getting more on a bit of a high horse about it, when people start talking to me about the problems of it, I said, explain it to me. Tell me what your thoughts and feelings are about it. Once again, I've identified myself personally that people that I'm having conversations with, you can answer your own questions, but people that I'm having conversations with, they're thinking back to their own childhood traumas, times where they feel like they were abused by a parent, a step-parent, someone in their immediate family, a teacher, clergy, whatever it may have been. They're experiencing trauma through some form of abuse, which is serious. I'm not trying to make light of that or trying to dismiss that as something that you gloss over. It's not. If you've experienced something like that, then you really need to have mental health counselling or whatever you need to do to deal with that trauma. But please don't project it onto everything else that everybody else does. Because I've seen people use positive punishment before where I think that was well and truly justified. And why the hell did you take so long to do it? It should have just been over and done with. It was a measure of control. It had the dog stop and think about it and then think, this is not working. Let's move on, shall we? When it's done correctly, the dog understands I needed to stop what I was doing. Like that whole process, I just needed to stop and think about this for a minute, realign, and then continue on. I know for a fact from my own hands and my own eyes and the witnessing that I've been involved in when people have done this correctly, dogs are just fine with it. They just move on. They just get on with their life. They're literally looking to go, that was a failed opportunity. I tried that behavior. You caught me. You dealt with it. Now we have to move on to something else. And the dog is happy and rapid and ready to change its response to another behavior. And then it figures out, okay, this one is rewardable. Now we're back on track. Now we're doing the right thing here. My long-winded approach to this, it's still very much confusion about abuse. That's the issue. When you're discussing this and when you're ready to sit down and have those debates with people, I think that you need to dig a little deeper than just accept the argument that, oh, you're being unfair to the dog and you're doing terrible things to the dog. When in reality, all you're doing is asking the dog, stop these behaviors. Like, I need you to realign your thinking. I need you to get yourself back on track. You've answered this in the past. Do you like punishing dogs?
Well, that's a tricky question.
Yep.
Because the answer has a lot of facets to it. So, like, I don't like doing anything to a dog that the dog would find aversive.
Right. But the whole point here for me is what I like doing is giving the dogs opportunities to realign themselves.
That's
like
right.
to have a little exchange in their mind where they're thinking, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of continuing to do this? Why don't we just switch tracks here? I guess that's what I was alluding to when I was answering the question. I didn't give you time to answer it really, because I'm kind of excited thinking about this myself. Because I know for myself when I'm trying to do this, all I'm trying to do is convince the dog, don't pursue this any longer. Like, all this is it's a brick wall that you're literally going to bang your head against when I'm offering you a field over here. Brick wall, field, your choice. It's not just a field, it's a field of opportunities. This is just dead end. There is no going over it, under it, around it. It's just endless. This is torment, like if you continue to do this, but it's your choice if you choose to do it. It's up to you. There's no going through this. It's the end. Where this one, it's a room of doors. Doors with countless opportunities and possibilities behind it. Let's explore that itself. That's what I want my dog to primarily do. I want my dog to switch tracks, look at that field or those row of doors and go, yeah, I'm all over that.
I think the thing with punishment and why it is, thought of as a dirty word is because so few people really understand it.
That's the problem, right?
Yeah. And as we've discussed, I think you mentioned it a few episodes ago when someone talked about people attending the punishment seminars.
Yeah.
It actually triggered me, mate. I'm thinking about running a punishment seminar because the last seminar I did in Melbourne, I mentioned something about punishment at that and looked into a group of 95 people and got a lot of blank stares and actually had to rejig and said, okay, well, after lunch, instead of doing what the thing I was going to do, we have to go through that because I need you to understand what I mean by punishment and the effect that it has. And I think that there isn't many people teaching it really well. It took me a long time to really, truly understand. Like, of course, I'm a balance trainer. I've been using pressure to compel dogs to do stuff and stop doing stuff for a long time. But I think that it took a long time for me to really get to the point where I really understand the real power of punishment and what it really is. And now I find myself, if I'm honest, I find myself punishing dogs more now than I ever have before, because I really understand what punishment is.
But more so the dog does now too.
Yeah, and
like,
exactly.
That's the thing.
They get what I'm talking about. And punishment takes so many different forms, because the main type of punishment that I'm using is a stopping of progression. Because at the moment, I'm blessed, I'm lucky that most of the dogs that I'm training are to do stuff. And so what I would in the past have trained a dog to do, I think I perhaps with some dogs put in a level of anxiety about, well, maybe they could still do the wrong thing, So like when a dog is in a down and we're in a really high arousal space, right? There's something that's really tempting the dog out of the down. Now you can think about that in terms of, if you're playing a bite sport, it could be your decoy or helper antagonizing the dog to try and bite them, so it's really highly appetitive thing that you need the dog to hold it down for. And if it's your pet dog chasing the bike down the street or the sheep that you got to walk past, whatever it is, right? I think that using nothing but positive reinforcement or reinforcement, even just using negative reinforcement as well, leaves to a lot of dogs, especially the more, dogs with more oomph to them, this sort of lingering thought in their mind of like, well, I mean, I could do it, right? And maybe the circumstances exist where I will get to do that. And that, the dog thinking that door is potentially still open, can create a lot of anxiety.
It's even the genetic component of it where the dog goes, fuck it, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Like my cells are screaming to do it. I'm sorry, I'm putting everything that you want to do on hold and I'm going to do this.
Yeah. For sure.
My ancestry is telling me that's what I have to do.
Yeah, I'm hardwired to do this. But I think, so one of the things, and certainly, like I've spoke about it here when Ivan was on the podcast, when I did his course, he's got a fantastic module on punishment, and it really opened my eyes to a way to use it in a way that I hadn't in the past. And what I find myself doing now is using punishment much more frequently in a way to just take something off the table for the dog.
Yep.
And just being like, hey, that's not going to go the way you think it's going to go, right? Like that's not how that's going to pan out. I think that a lot of the times we think about using punishment as like a last resort and stuff like that. But when it's done correctly and done in a way where the dog goes, oh, okay, got it. Like this is you telling me that's not going to pan out. Like I'm not going to do that. And punishment can look like, especially when we're using isolation as a form of punishment, right? So take, for example, no doubt about to do it tonight because we've got a dog that I'm going to be working on some stability stuff with, is that dog's going to break the position. He's going to do it, right? Our goal is that he doesn't, but we're going to be pushing the thresholds of what he can handle and he's going to break the down. It's almost certainly going to happen. And in that moment, his world's going to collapse because he's a working dog that wants to do work and we're going to take that work away. And not in any way that anybody would identify as like, I'm not going to do anything to the dog. What's going to happen is the helper is going to drop the sleeve or the person's going to drop the toy that is available to the dog. And we're going to say to the dog like, nah, and we're going to stand up and we're going to leave where he was. And what that dog's going to do for sure is he's going to try barking and he's going to try pulling. He's going to try everything he can to try and get to that thing. And he'll try that for a good few minutes. And in that few minutes, we're just going to hold the leash and we're not going to let him do that. And then he's going to look to me for an answer and I'm not going to give him an answer. And I'm going to wait till he calms down. And then I'll be like, that's what happens. You get a total withdrawal from the work. And he may get like a little pop on the prong collar or something like that afterwards to be like, hey man, you can't do that. And then we'll bring him back around. We'll make friends again. We'll be like, hey, all of this can be yours, but you have to do the thing that we know you know how to do. You're just not allowed to do the thing that you felt like the right thing for you to do in that moment. And the dog will get it, right? That's how punishment works. And I think that we have put into our minds this idea that punishment is like the last case scenario, like that's the last thing you do, and that it has to be this overwhelmingly, like people imagine it to be some sort of brutality. The truth is it just doesn't have to be that. Like, it just
but that's
isn't.
coming through projection.
No, that's right.
That's the issue,
that's
is
right.
people are projecting their own trauma onto the dog training landscape. what they're doing, if I may talk about the other part of the question where she started talking about the use of remote trainers, aka the shock collars and so forth. As I mentioned, people are projecting their own trauma. They're bringing it into that arena and saying, well, I felt that this happened. There's a large group of people who are advocating for this who have no understanding what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're simply just projecting. I want to use the remote trainer side of the argument. The reason that there is so much stigma around that is because when that was introduced into the market, it was introduced to a market that had no real agency or education around them. There were people who basically go, well, how do these work? You just put them on and do this, this, and this. So there was a large open field of people just working their way through it. And it's like science to a large degree. Science does a lot of things where it needs to go, well, we need to understand how this works. And it's kind of very broad until it quickly narrows its way down. And all of this that we've learned about remote trainers over a landscape of years had to come through trial and error, which, yes, there's some dogs who got some unjustified work with remote trainers. I know what the old Tritronics trainers were like. I mean, I witnessed them in the early days. They were clunky. You had to pull these big resistors out of them. Like, they're nothing like the modern trainers that we've got these days. Mm-hmm. People just kind of figured, well, I couldn't even be bothered pulling the resistor out, so I'm just going to work the dog on this level. And some poor old dogs will push through some really terrible things. And people watched them and they thought, no, I can't advocate for that. And to be honest, going back in time, there were things that I looked at with the dogs and I thought, oh, I don't like the way that looks either, and spoke out about it and objected to it. The good thing is most of the people that I was with and I was working with understood that as well, and they advocated for that as well and thought there's lots of room for change here. So when you're thinking about these type of things, the unfortunate reality is, as I've stipulated many times in different groups, when you go looking for problems, you'll find them.
Yeah.
They're there. The problems are there. The poster child is there. Sam Newman from the Footy Show, who our American listeners won't know, we have a AFL show in Melbourne, and there was an old footy player who used to trawl the streets in some of the lesser income suburbs of Melbourne, and he'd always look for that person, that particular type of person, low education, low IQ, possibly drunk, who would spout off so everybody on the show could laugh at the ridiculousness of that person. They were a target person. Every time that I've been involved with politics in dog training, every time that there's been opposition to the use of remote trainers, the objection towards punishment, they're always looking for that type of person.
Yeah.
And they will always find that type of person.
Yeah.
It's so easy for them to pull them out because that type of person always exists. And it doesn't matter how many Glenn Cooks, Pat Stewarts, Larry Crones, Michael Ellis's, whoever is out there that's doing terrific work, and there's a score of those type of people out there who are doing fucking amazing work with the tools, with the education, with building themselves up, with collaborating with each other, all of those people and much, much more, coming together and saying, how can we do this better? How can we be fairer to our dogs? How can we advocate for their agency, is develop a better system and a better structure? That's what we're doing. That's why we're talking all this rhetoric all the time, is not just because we like hearing the sound of our own voices. We actually want to improve the landscape for our dogs. We love our dogs. We really want to do this. But the problem will always exist that those political horrors that are out there are still looking for old mate who has 10 points of IQ, who got himself a remote trainer and is happy to use it on public television. And they'll say, this is what these people are doing. They're entirely wrong. They're so far off the trail. And that's the disappointing side of it. And that's what we're fighting against.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I'm not bringing this up just because I want to spin a negative on this all the time, or I want to bring the mood down with everybody. What I really want to do is try and make more of this, more calls to action. And the reason I say that is because when I've seen other sides where people are starting to argue this, you're letting your emotions come through. You're letting them bait you into becoming angry. You're being turned into the person they want you to become. They want to see somebody who is educated. They want to see somebody who is doing the right thing. They want you to lose your cool, and they want to get you on record doing that. And that's a form of entrapment where they're basically luring you into the tar pits, and then you fall in and they go, ha, 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 look at you great big dope covered in tar.
Yeah.
They want you to do these type of things, where what I want you to do is I want you to become more educated. I want you to keep your cool and say this. I'm not sure of the answer that you're looking for, but I have a colleague who does. And I think it's time that we collaborate with the group of us. You bring your colleagues in and I bring my colleagues in, rather than get stuck trying to answer something and then look foolish and then undoing the good work that all the rest of us are trying to put together. If you're listening to this and you think, oh, he's referring to me, I'm referring to all of us. There are times even where I have to button my lip. I've told the story many times of when I got on social media years ago before it was a popular thing and started spouting off about lure coursing, and I had no idea about it. I got caught fucking red-handed. I look like a prize fuckwit. I vowed to myself I'll never do that again, and I have done it again at other times because I got angry. My emotions came out. My big feels surfaced. I should have just shut the fuck up and thought to myself, I'm going to ring Pat, or I'm going to ring Larry, or I'm going to ring another friend of mine and I'm going to say, hey, you're more versed in this than I am. I think that you need to speak on this topic. Now I find myself shutting up a lot more because there's a good saying that I remember that says it's better to be thoughtful than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. I would rather people think, well, he doesn't know, blah, 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 than open my mouth and prove the fact that I don't know.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of people who think they're coming to rescue and they're not. All they're doing is they're doing what I mentioned before with Sam Newman's entrapment, where it's not entrapment. He was just trying to make entertaining TV, but he found his Wallies. He found his bogan. He found his redneck, you know, the type of person who he thought, this person's going to fuck this up right royally and everybody across the nation is going to get a big belly laugh at how stupid they look on national TV. That's not what we want to do with punishment or with remote trainers or anything like that. These people are collating and trying to entrap us with information all the time. They've really got to be in their bonnet about it. It's an endless assault on us. We've just got to be smarter about how we approach it.
Yeah, I think one of the tricky parts when you talk about punishment, especially publicly, is that you don't get to start at zero, right? So like that word has pretty strong connotation attached to it. Even outside of the dog training or behavioral space, that word punishment, it has a level of vindictiveness to it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how people think of it. Like I'm going to punish you. And we really need to, I guess this is the problem with the language that Skinner left us with, is that, you know, punishment means to decrease the frequency and likelihood, right? It's not your chance to get out the angers of the past or anything like that. And so I think in line with what TK is saying here is that that's why we use the word, that's why we encourage other people to use the word, is because it says like, no, I'm decreasing the frequency of this. Like I'm taking this off the table to the dog. A lot of the times, again, it's sort of referring back to teaching punishment. Often when I'll teach punishment and then when the next dog comes out, I'll do it and then I'll say to people, hey, did you see it? Maybe only a third of people will have noticed. Especially just recently I was working it was a staffy I was working in a seminar. It knew it's out, but like I was helping teach the out and it got cheeky one time and just wouldn't let go. So like I let go and it's a total timeout, right? Like it's like, no, like my whole body posture changes and we walk away from the tug together and the game is over. And I'll give that dog like a really strong look of disappointment. And we have, 15, 20 seconds standing away from the game. And then eventually I bring the dog back in and we go, okay, would you like to play again? And then I can open the window and away we go. So like that's punishment. That's negative punishment. That's how it works. And sometimes I'll add, depending on how appropriate it is, like we add a positive punishment component to that because I have to stop the progression of the behavior. So whatever it is, I have to find a way to be able to actually stop it from happening, because if it is happening, it's self-reinforcing or it is reinforcing of a nature, right? And so maybe in order to stop the progression, I need to use some sort of aversive. And then perhaps at the back end of that isolation piece, I might apply some sort of positive punishment at that point. But the levels of that are really small. And the science backs this up.
It only needs to be what it needs to be.
Yeah. And what it needs to be is, there's evidence that suggests that the level of pressure that will motivate a being, right? So let's imagine that we've got our rat in the cage and we can electrify the floor and the levels can go to 100. And maybe the rat just endures the electricity to level 10, then he starts looking for an answer to that problem, right, at level 10. Well, if you go through like the sequence of punishment, that same rat will be punished by level 1, right? So that level 1 of punishment, like a tenth of what it takes to motivate a dog, can be used as an aversive when the work is done prior, right? When the arousal is brought down and it's at the back end of the isolation piece. And so punishment, while sometimes, depending on what the dog's doing, you might have to really stop a dog in the moment because what it's doing is dangerous or whatever. and the aversive that you're giving at that moment, an aversive stim in one way or another, no matter what the tool or technique, that seldom is the punishment. That's just stopping the behavior because the behavior is dangerous to the dog or someone else.
It's just neutralizing what's happening.
The punishment is what follows after that,
Yep.
and the situation as it unfolds post that. And so I think that's the issue. I think that the reason we face so much problems with the word punishment is that it's a loaded term. And so we can't change that. That is what it is.
There's so many words that have become loaded since.
Oh, for sure. But I think as well, as you said, I think by the time there aren't many people teaching how to use punishment correctly. And by the time that you're being asked about punishment, you're then defending something at that point.
Right.
And so that's why people tend to get their hackles up and they maybe don't speak as well as they could in other circumstances. It's very easy for them to be perceived as somebody who's hell-bent on punishing the dog while you're saying there's all these other options. But in reality, that was the option that they decided in the moment. And I think sometimes what we see as well is that there's a lot of theoretical dog training that goes on. Now, I'm aware of the irony of two guys that talk about dog training every week, but I'm real dog trainers. I've got my hands on dogs all the time, right? Yeah. I'm employed not just to teach people about dog training, but train dogs. I'm training dogs all the time. And the way that I train dogs, the people who I train dogs for, they want fucking results. You know what I mean? Like, because I charge a lot of money and what they're not interested in is me saying, okay, well, we've got a 6-month action plan on you doing all of this incremental work and maybe through differential reinforcement of other behaviors, you'll be able to get the dog to stop doing that. I don't live in that world.
No, I live to you mainly for a magic pill.
Yeah, not just that, but like I live in the world of we need the dog to be doing this.
Yep.
And most of the dogs that I am training at the moment are really high drive and very powerful dogs. I'm lucky that I get the opportunity to do that. That's the kind of work that I love to do. And so I don't get to live in the world of, well, we'll see how it goes, because sometimes these dogs can be fucking dangerous, and we've got to find a way to communicate, hey, you can't do that. And the path of seeing how we go over the next 6 to 12 months with differential reinforcement, stuff like that, like that's cool if you're on a bit of a journey yourself and you want to like see how you go with that, that's fine. But it's not results based, right? Like for people who need results from their dog. And so I think that's one of the issues is that people who like us, and especially what we often find is that people who are good at using punishment kind of end up being one-trick ponies because that's what people come to them for when they've been failed by other things. And so often as a trainer, like one of the things that was interesting to me when I was doing a lot of in-home behavior mod stuff, right, is I used to get a lot of referrals from the vet. And so, because I had a good relationship with my local vet. But there's a bunch of trainers in my area that are varied degrees of skill set, and there was a bunch of trainers with varied degrees of what they're willing to do, all the way from really hardcore force-free trainers all the way up to pretty old school, won't say the name of the company, but, like pretty crappy old school throw the
old yank and crank.
Well, not even yank and crank, like throw the chain on the floor in front of the dog kind of dumb shit, right?
Yep. The old disruptor training.
Yeah. And like, but, including yank and crank and all that. And so on the table, on the counter, there's a list of business cards, and there might have been 6 business cards for different trainers. And when somebody comes in with their cute little puppy and they're like, oh, I'm here for my 12-week vaccinations with my adorable little dog that nothing has gone wrong with, and can you recommend a trainer? Well, they don't fucking recommend me, do they? Because anyone could do that shit. Right? So they recommend any one of these people, but they go with the people who they think are going to do a good job by those people. And for the most part, they do. Here's the card of like a Delta trainer, right? Go to the puppy school, learn environmental enrichment, all this kind of shit. And they're great, like perfect. But then when someone comes in and they're like, hey, kill this fucking dog, it's ruining my life. And the vet goes, oh, have you tried any training? And they're like, I've been through 3 fucking trainers and none of them can get through to this dog. The dog's been medicated. I've done all these things and none of it's fucking working. The vet at that point then, okay, well, I'm not doing that until you call this guy. And so when you're the guy that gets the call of the vet's making me have an appointment with you before he'll kill my fucking dog, well, the type of training you get to do is pretty different to the people who get to deal with the puppies and the easy cases and stuff like that. And I can see how people find themselves in a position where they're becoming really strong advocates of punishment and sounding like that's their one tool. Because for me, for a while, and I was not as good with punishment as I am now, but I still saved a lot of fucking dogs, that people had been through multiple other trainers that probably the training would have worked if it had been done by a person with the skill set of the trainer. And I think that's one of the things that I think that we forget, or I don't forget, but oh no, I've done this, I've fucked this up for sure, is that I think sometimes as trainers, we go into people's homes and we're dealing with, problematic behaviors, and we look at it and we go, yep, like there's a path to fixing this. It's a 6-week path. And I'm going to be really precise. I've got a whole plan of action. I'm going to dedicate an hour a day to this dog, and I'm going to reprogram how this dog thinks over a 6-week period. And we explain that to the people, and you might get them to buy in for that 6 weeks, but they don't have your skill set. They're not going to do it every day. First of all, they're not going to do it every day the way that we would as dog people, right? Because here's an interesting thing that I heard Arnold Schwarzenegger say, so I'm stealing it, right? He's got a bunch of animals, and he was talking about social media, and he was talking about how he doesn't check his phone until all the animals are fed, because it doesn't matter what's happening on his phone. It doesn't matter what messages he gets. It doesn't matter what people are asking him to do or what's happened in the world. Those animals have to be fucking fed.
Yep.
So he can do that with a fresh mind in the morning, or he can do that distracted by whatever's happening in his phone. It has to be done. And before he can action anything that's in his phone. And I thought that's really interesting, because that's how a lot of us sort of live our dog lives. Like, my dogs are getting what they need. That's one of the priorities to me. I don't want to say like, I care about my dogs more than anything in the world, because it's important for me. It relieves the tension within. And that's the case probably for most people listening, is that right now, as always, I'm battling a bunch of injuries, but I'm about to go out there and fucking get in a bite suit, because that's super important to me. Those dogs, I want to do that shit.
Good for your mental health.
Yeah, I need to do that. So for us as trainers, we think, certainly some people, not all of us, there's rhythm to this, like everything, but I think that we expect that people will be able to do with the same enthusiasm, the same commitment, and the same skill set, the training that their dog needs in the way that we would be able to do it. And some of the more complex behavioral cases where you're dealing with aggression, or you're dealing with reactivity, or you're just dealing with a dog that's highly committed, like it just might be a really awesome dog that just never got the training to give it commitment to something that could be used as a reinforcer and then control behaviors. The dog hasn't been shown that path, and it's just committed to an annoying thing. Like, some of the things, like the biggest problem behaviors, are just unmet needs. And it might be way too far gone to meet that need, because the dog is like, it's lost its mind in pursuit of it. So all of these sorts of things, us as trainers can see that. And we're like, oh no, there's an easy path to this. You just have to do A, B, C, D. And it's often just not possible by a person. They don't have the commitment. We train every day. That's where I'm going with the checking the animals thing. Like, I train every fucking day. I do something with my dog every day. And, with my 2 elderly dogs now, it doesn't mean that we're out running around in circles together, but we're doing something. I have to stimulate them every day, because I have no choice, right? It's an internal pressure that I have to relieve of my own, and they have those internal pressures from themselves. But our clients don't feel that way. Our clients will just put the dog in the yard and deal with that problem later, in the same way that I don't do my knee rehab the way that I'm meant to every fucking time. It's the same thing. As a result, so many people have said to clients, and just the general zeitgeist of dog training, you don't need to use punishment, and that people overuse punishment. And for sure, there are times where that is the case. There are times where people go to punishment too early without going like, well, actually, no, we don't need to punish this at all. We just need to teach the dog something else, right? Like, this is a displaced dog, and we just need to give it a thing to do, and it will happily do that and not do this other thing that it's doing, because it's only doing that because it doesn't know what else to do. So let's teach it something else. There's heaps of times where that is the case, but people don't necessarily have the skill set that so many trainers think that they have, and the ability to do it. So many people think that punishment is unnecessary, because for them, it would be unnecessary. They're prepared to put in the time, the effort, the things, and use their incredibly high skill set to get the dog through the situation without punishing it. But the reality is, most people don't have that skill set. And so as a trainer, I can totally see how people get like their back up about it, and that they find themselves in a situation where they're getting really mad when they're talking to people, because they're like, hey, I've been told many times, and I've been told this. I often tell the story. I had a Doberman client one time that told me on a Friday afternoon, and the only reason they got me around was because someone talked them into it. We've made the fucking appointment. This dog's getting killed in the morning, on Saturday morning, unless you show me that you can do something about this. And I'm like, hey, that's ridiculous. That's an unfair timeline on me and the dog. And then they tell me the story about the 5 other trainers who have made the problem worse. And they're only getting the session with me because someone convinced them and guilt tripped them into doing it.
Yeah, it happens so many times.
So that session for me and that dog goes, I looked at that dog and I said, hey, man, I'm fucking sorry about what's about to happen to you, but you're living. I'm getting you fucking through this, but it is not going to go the way that it would go if I had a couple of days with you, right? But I'm going to fucking keep you alive, man, because other people have failed you. But that session is not representative of what could have been had I had the opportunity to go in earlier. And so many dog trainers find themselves in those situations where we then go, we get our backs up about punishment. We're like, we fucking rely on this. You can't say that this doesn't work. I'm using it all the time. And you can't tell me I can't do it because then I can't save these fucking dogs. And people go, oh, well, you're just a guy that wants to punish dogs. It's like, no, I would love not to do that. I would love to get those referrals of the puppies that just need to learn how to do some enrichment.
Yeah, we'd love
and
to start them at the early basis and never have that mindset created.
Love that. But a lot of people won't take these cases, or they create these cases and they put me in a position where now I have to be doing this. So I totally understand why people flip their lid about punishment sometimes when people are like, oh, that's unnecessary. And people just, the cup goes full and they're like, that's it. You're getting my tirade of explanations because I'm the one that's doing this. And a lot of times, like I say, with that Doberman that I had to look at and say, hey man, like I'm fucking sorry about this, but you're living. I would love to have been the first trainer that got called when my Doberman has a little bit of a reactivity issue. Like the dog badly bit the owner at the sight of another dog on the street. Like I'm talking fucking badly bit the owner to the point where I check with, this is a long time ago, but it comes up in my head every time I think about it. Like I said, hey, this dog ever done any kind of bite work or anything like that? They're like, no, definitely not. I'm like, cool. So I can wear my bite suit around the dog and it's not going to arouse the dog, right? Yep, cool. So I walked the dog in the fucking bite suit down the street, had my 2 dogs in my van at the end of the street. The second he scented my dogs, he turned around and fucking nailed me in the leg.
Yep.
Right? And I'm talking not like nip me. I'm talking he nailed me. Like as good a bite as probably the best bite I've ever seen from Doberman, if I'm honest. And I looked at the lady and I said, is this what he did to you? And she just burst into tears and was like, yep. And I was like, I get it. I understand why you don't want this dog around. Right? But so I would have liked to have been called when the dog first lunged at another dog, not when it got to the point where he was so reactive and so fucked up around being around other dogs that he's biting the first thing that he can find, which is the person at the end of the leash. So my big ranty tirade point is that that's why punishment has such a dirty word to so many people, because people think that it's unnecessary, and sometimes for them it is. But we have to look at every dog and every case and look at every handler, and the picture has to come together.
Absolutely.
We have to put the whole thing together and go, okay, what is going to be actually successful here? Like, how am I going to improve this dog's life? How am I going to solve the problem that the people are having with the dog? And how am I going to do that in a way that's fair and ethical to the dog? And very often, for a lot of in-home behavior mod type stuff, that can be saying to the dog, hey man, don't do that. Right? I'm going to punish you if you do that. I'm going to decrease the frequency and likelihood of this problem behavior. And the moment that's off the table, I'm now going to start teaching you about what I do need you to do, because that can take time. I can convince people to put the work into you becoming the dog that they want when you're no longer dangerous to other dogs or to other people or to, destroying their lives. If I can stop that immediately, now I can give these people hope, and they will put in the work to do the positive reinforcement side once the real problem is gone. And that void has to be filled. We know that. We know that of punishment, that the risk of punishment. Then one of the things when we hear people talk about, oh, punishment's bad, it can make dogs aggressive and all this kind of shit. Punishment can't make a dog anything, right? Punishment, when it's done, can only stop things. That's what punishment is. If you've made a dog aggressive via what you think is punishment, you have been negatively reinforcing that dog into aggression.
Yep.
You cannot make a dog anything with punishment. And so what we know is true is that you can leave a void.
Possibly positively reinforced as well.
Of course, right? So you can leave a void when you punish something away. When the dog, say the dog, hey, you can't do that. That space has to get filled. That energy is going somewhere, and you need to very quickly show the dog, hey, but do this instead. This is what I do need you to do. And there's lots that people don't know about how to do punishment correctly because there's so few people that are willing to teach it, and there's so few places that you can go to learn how to do it properly. And there's so few people, like who will put up video or create courses or teach people because they're worried about getting fucking destroyed over it, right? And so I think that's part of the bigger issue that we face around all of these
But
things.
yet, we all go to positive punishment seminars, according to old mate on the forum. I have a question for you in regards to this. You're probably the wrong person to ask this question, actually, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. Do you know how to operate and drive an agricultural tractor?
No.
Good. You're the right person for that.
I'll say no. I reckon I'd figure it out.
Yeah.
Remind me to tell you my forklift story after this.
I will. The reason I asked you that question is on the flip side of that, you would have to say that you're a pretty proficient vehicle driver, wouldn't you? Like a car driver.
Yeah.
You could operate one of those almost on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
Even if you're driving stick, no problem, you'd be able to drive it.
Yeah.
But put you in a tractor, you'd be lost, right?
Yeah.
So the problem for us in using that comparison, a farmer can drive a tractor proficiently with expertise, and they can also do the same with a car and many other vehicles. The problem for us, the people who are telling us how to drive the tractor are proficient at driving cars but have no place in being a fucking tractor. In fact, they'd be dangerous at doing so. Yet they claim proficiency in doing so. I'm not a proficient person in a tractor. We've got a tractor here and I can use it for slashing, and I do. I slash some of our other properties and stuff like that. I can drive it and I'm actually pretty good at it. I can drive a Bobcat. I've done all those sort of things. But get me in one of those big industrial agricultural tractors, mate, I'd be lost with all the buttons and knobs and everything. Now, like you, with education, I could work it out. But that's the whole point. With education, you can do it.
There's a place you can go to learn that.
There's a place you can go to learn that. But you need to first go and learn that before you can tell other people or even educate them around it. Now, what place would I have in going to a farmer now and getting in an argument with him about how to control an agricultural tractor?
Yeah.
Yet, we're succumbing to that same problem in society all the time where there is a slippage of people telling people how to effectively control their dogs by the use of effective punishment. Now, I'm fucking telling you all here right now, without this education, they're not punishing their dogs anymore. They're abusing the dogs.
Yeah.
Because they're going over thresholds and they're using excessive force because they don't know what they're doing because nobody has ever taken the time to educate them. You take all this off the table, you create this society of secrecy around it. Now you've got a problem where people are genuinely abusing their dogs. But that's not their intent. They didn't want to do this and they don't want to do this. And if you outlined it to them, if you went to them and said, hey, that's abuse, man, you've crossed a threshold where you're not giving your entity the ability to control what's happening to them anymore. Like they don't understand what the outcomes here are. They just don't get it. They don't see what's on the other side of this. They're just afraid of you. Then they go, well, that's not what I want. But the problem is you have stripped that person of any recognition or understanding. Once again, it's like putting someone in a fucking agricultural tractor and saying, now I need you to go and plow those fields and sow all those seeds. Well, good luck, mate. I've just set you up to fail. You're literally going to sit there shitting yourself, like crashing into fucking fences, ripping things up, possibly hurting yourself in the process of doing it because nobody has given you an active education on how to do this. We are literally being disciplined and told what to do by people who have no place in that game.
Yeah.
And then making up fabricated remarks like that saying where they say reward happens in the mind of people who provide punishment. What's the phrase?
Punishment is reinforcing to the punisher.
Oh, isn't that diabolical?
Yeah, it's fucking stupid.
I get it that there's people out there who are like that. They're probably people who are fucking contemplating being a serial killer as well. There's something unhinged in their brains. But normal, everyday people, logical people, they don't want to fucking hurt their dogs.
Mate, one of the funniest things, or not funniest, saddest, I should say, is when I've heard force-free trainers say that the reason I don't use any tools is because I have in the past and I'd lose my temper and I would abuse a dog with the tool. And I'm like, it's not the tool, mate. It's you. And if you fucking think that I believe even for a second that you're not beating up the dog with your bare hands now because you're not using the tools don't abuse the dog. You abuse the dog. the fact that you don't use tools anymore doesn't make you less likely to abuse the dogs. It makes the brutality that you're putting the dogs through probably much worse.
Mate, this is a genuine story, one of many that I witnessed with my own peepers, not only myself, but several people watched this unfold in front of them. I won't say where it was or who it was. The person is now deceased and everything like that, but I'm not going to mention their name on here just because of their family and stuff like that. But what they did was at one of the dog clubs that I was running, they came down and their whole MO was they wanted me to stop using correction chains at that centre. Literally had a campaign. And them and another person were on my case about it all the time. They were going to one of the controlling bodies and saying, we don't want correction chains down here. And I fought for the advocacy of them. And I said, no, we're going to use them. This breed needs to use them. The same person who was campaigning this, the same person who was literally a thorn in my side the whole way, lost their shit with their own dog out the front and booted the dog in the ribs.
Yeah.
And everybody who was out the front, there was probably about 15 people saw it. They realized what they did and their whole campaign fell away.
Yeah.
And this is a person who was advocating for the removal of tools and for the advocacy of force-free. Now, when I say this, I realize that I'm not talking about all the people in the Plus R and the force-free communities. I'm not doing that. I'm talking about an individual who lost their shit, and then people would say, well, they're not a representation of me. Exactly the fucking point. The people who commit atrocities to dogs aren't advocating for me, and certainly not you as well, or anybody else that I know who is a good person. So why are we being corralled into the same paddocks? Why are we being thought of in that same way? That's why it always frustrates me, and this is why I do get on these rants, is because we're just not those people.
Yeah. I think the thing as well, it's the last thing I'll say on punishment because we've got to wrap up. And I don't like doing these sorts of episodes. I know we fall into a trap doing these sometimes.
These are the episodes where people can take snippets like they've done in the past and use them in their own grubby mandates.
But it's just sort of a negative, like the whole feel is kind of negative on it.
But if we don't talk about it, not many other people are.
No, that's right. That's why we do.
And that's why it has to be spoken about, because we've got to stop shying away from having the conversations in fear of it sounds negative.
Yeah.
We've got to have this and think about it may sound negative, but it also is educational.
Yeah.
We need to be having more of these conversations.
Yeah. What I want to say on punishment is that used properly, as everything should be in training, right? It makes things so much clearer for the dog. And that's the point of punishment, is that you're going like, hey, you can't do that, right? Like that's not the thing that we want to do. And without informing the dog of that, you're leaving a space where the dog thinks, well, maybe I just didn't get it right, or maybe I didn't try hard enough, or maybe I need to do this instead. That's the point of punishment, is the clarity that it brings.
Yep.
And that's why I use punishment, is just to go to the dog like, hey, don't do that, right? Because when I'm teaching a dog to do stuff, I'm not saying don't do that. Like I'm using tons and tons of reinforcement, positive and negative. I'm helping the dog understand. That's the whole point. And all of the training that we do is to have the dog understand, hey, this is what's in your interest. And it doesn't matter what the dog is actually doing. It doesn't matter whether it's a high-powered working dog or whether it's somebody's pet in their home. Our goal as a trainer is to be like, I will steer you towards your very best life.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, right?
And we're witness to it too.
Yeah.
We watch it happen.
That's right. And sometimes steering a dog towards its very best life just involves showing it like, hey, if you do this, you get good things. And that can be as simple as that.
Yep.
But then other times it involves saying to the dog, if you do this, you get good things. The dog's like, yeah, but I want to do this other thing, which is dangerous or whatever. And those are the times where you have to go, hey, but you can't do that. That doesn't take you towards success. That only leads to punishment. And by punishment, I mean whatever is appropriate in that moment to decrease the frequency and likelihood of the behavior. And it's been my experience, and everybody that trains with me and the dogs that I train, quite a few people recently, right? I've fixed issues. I got on a little bit of I'll say it, power trip in that lately, because I have the time and space, the space more than anything, I've been inviting lots of people from the dog sport community in Australia to my shop to have me fix issues with their dogs. And sometimes that involves punishing the dog. Recently, I've had numerous people come in. They tell me the issue. I'm like, yep, cool. I have a path to doing that. 90% of what I'm doing is positive reinforcement based, or reinforcement of a kind. Then the trouble will arise, the thing that we're trying to actually fix, and I'll punish the dog. And the overwhelming consensus, I'm talking 100%, is people like say to me, I cannot believe the clarity that brought to my dog. I cannot believe how clear you made the path to success for my dog. And that's the point of punishment. Like that's the whole point, is that we show the dog, hey, that's not going to take you to success.
Let's just get over this. Let's just do this.
Yeah. And by allowing the dog to think, well, maybe I'll be able to, maybe I'll be able to. And even when people think they're punishing, but they actually end up using negative reinforcement instead, because, very few people are teaching what punishment really is and how to do it properly. That just creates more and more stress and anxiety in the dog, because they're now having options, and some of those options are spicy and dangerous. And that's one of the biggest issues. That's what we see where a lot of dogs that get really spooled up is that they're stuck in a situation where they think they have options that they don't have. And so what you're doing by allowing a dog to think it has options that it doesn't have is you're inviting a level of reactivity or anxiousness or nervousness or anticipation, and non-appetitive anticipation, but you're inviting that into the dog's mind where the dog's thinking maybe, and you go, hey, no, never. That's never going to pan out. That's not how it's going to go.
Yep.
And the moment that the dog understands that, all of that stress, all of that anxiety, all of that anxiousness, it's gone, because the dog goes, oh, well, that's off the table. That's off the table.
Yeah.
But so long as the dog thinks it's on the table, now there's the possibility of it. And we know that leads to this like massive increase in stress. And so while punishment, even in its worst, when it's done correctly, and I'm talking like it's actual punishment, right? Like we're not abuse and not misinterpreting what the signals and not accidentally doing negative reinforcement. When you actually punish a dog in the moment, it should be stressful for the dog. That's the whole point. It should be aversive. That's the whole point of punishment. But then immediately afterwards, the dog's like, oh, got it. Now I know that's off the table. Now I can start looking for the real path to success. And like I said, there's risks involved in that, because now you've left a vacuum. You've taken something off the table, and that space will be filled. But it's up to you to fill it straight away. And don't let the dog experiment with other behaviors and unless through experimentation with other behaviors, the dog is likely to get the right behavior. But just allowing the dog to fill that space is usually not the right thing. You immediately want to show the dog, this is what I need you to do. You can't do that, but you can do this. And then in my experience, when that's done correctly, the dog always goes, oh, fucking sweet. Why didn't you tell me that 6 weeks ago?
Yep.
Why didn't we understand this earlier? Now I know how to find success. Why would I do it any other way? And it's not that the dog isn't going to do the thing because of the looming threat of punishment. It's because the dog now understands that's not the thing. This other thing is the thing. I know how to find success now. And that's communication. And I think that too much we think of punishment as being this like terrible thing that we should never do. And in reality, what punishment is, both negative and positive punishment, is a forms of communication.
And motivation.
Well, in my courses now, the way that I teach, everything is motivate, communicate, coach. But I teach those components are in the communication components. They're not in the motivation components. They're in the communication parts, because I think that punishment is a form of communication. It's you saying to the dog like, hey, don't do that, right? Now, of course, you have to understand motivation, how it all works. But I put punishment under the heading of communication, because that's where I'm saying to the dog, hey, that's off the table, don't do that. Same as reinforcement is then like, yes, do that. And that's all we're doing, is we're just like playing bumper bowling, where we're bouncing off the sides. Yes, do this. No, don't do that. Yes, do this. And those channels get narrower and narrower and narrower until the dog's in a straight line and goes, got it. I know the path to success. I understand this.
Like I often think about it myself. Let's leave dogs for a minute and transfer to human society. Without the firewall of punishment there would be a lot of people who would be exploring a lot more of those behaviors. Now, I'm not talking about immoral, unquestionable type of behaviors. Let's not talk about those sort of things, because that's not the territory I want to traverse. But there are certainly a lot of societal behaviors that do exist beyond a firewall. And we know that if we go after them and pursue them, that they lead to punishment, which is why we have a civilized society, or what we consider a civilized society, because we're basically saying, as a group consensus, we all agree that these behaviors only lead to problems within our society, where all the other ones, you can explore those ones and you can be free to roam and free to do all those ones. Now, without that firewall there, people are certainly going to think, why not give it a go? Why not look into that? Now, you'll get people who will ebb and flow.
Well, like a dog, you would just follow your own impulses.
Exactly right. Now, there are people who are going to go and have a go at them regardless of what the law says, but they have to know, when you do that, these are the consequences for doing that, which is why there's only a small percentage of people who will do that. They will say, oh, well, I'm going to traverse that territory. Fuck it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it a go. But when they get caught, they realize, no, that wasn't such a good idea. And it's a message for everybody else. There'll be people out there, you often use the term kicking the dashboard because people will be saying, well, that's a ridiculous example because dogs are different than human beings. I get that. And that's why we're acting on their behalf. That's why we're trying to get over these hurdles and to stop them repeat offending these behaviors so we can bring them into clarity much sooner. We can actually develop a better system with the dogs where we're not worried about the fact that tomorrow is going to be another encounter with the dog. The following day is going to be another punishment session. We're over it. We're done with that.
Yeah.
The hurdle has been completed. We can get on with good business once again.
Yep.
I'm with you. I agree with you. Like I said, the only reason I know about this and the only reason I'm going to stand here and continue to argue the point is because I'm witness to it.
Yeah.
I'm actually seeing the physical transformation.
Yeah.
When I hear the same thing with people when they're ready to give up, when they're at their wits' end, and finally this procedure takes place and they said, why wasn't this brought up earlier? And that's my question too, because it's a very good question. Why wasn't it brought up earlier? The problem is you're being told to drive a tractor by a car driver, not a tractor operator. But they're still going to sit there and die on that hill that they know how to drive that tractor. This is the thing. Put them in the tractor seat and say, now that you're willing to have this argument with me, show me.
Yeah, but the answer's often just euthanize the tractor. That's the issue. Well, I'll tell you quickly, when I was an apprentice, right?
Your forklift story?
Yeah, so the guy I was apprentice to was in my first few weeks. He goes, hey, you know how to drive a forklift? And I was like, yeah. So he's like, I could grab the forklift, come out, grab this thing we just made and put it on the truck. I crashed the forklift into its own little shed.
Yep.
I crashed it, then got it kind of semi-bogged as I was getting around there. I knocked the corner off the stone that we'd made, and then I basically smashed that stone into the truck. And then I got the forklift bogged in the same little spot again on my way back. And then I put the forks through the back of the forklift shed. And the guy that was there, he didn't say a word. He just watched me do all this. And then I get out of the forklift and he says to me, I'm like a kid, right? He goes, I thought you said you knew how to drive a forklift. I said, mate, I genuinely thought I could. I've never done it before, but I just kind of thought, how hard could it be?
Yep.
And evidently it's pretty hard. That's my forklift story.
And so too are the days of our lives with people bumbling through the dog industry, giving out expert advice when they have no place in doing so.
Exactly, like me driving a forklift.
Mate, I know I probably have on this episode, I probably grizzled a little bit about this a little bit along the ways, but over all of the terms that I've been in, watching people enter the industry with gusto and power, nothing but self-praise, and then leave it in flames and wreckage. This happens every 5 to 10 years. Every 5 to 10 years, I watch a new flush of people coming through the industry. It just gets to a point where I just think,
with their new ideas about how to drive a forklift.
That's fine as long as they know how to do it. That's fine. Like I said, I'm willing to be taught. I'm willing for people to say to me, hey, I've got some ideas and I've got some education that you haven't got. Now I'm willing to say, yeah, you have.
Yeah.
I want to learn from you. But they're the 1%ers. The rest of them are convinced, like you were, that they can drive the forklift and they'll smash it in everything and take out everything along the way. And they'll just get out and go, oh, well, gave that a good go, didn't I? They have no...
Walk off, leaving it bogged.
Well, they have no moral compass about it at the end. Like they just think, well, you're the fuckwit for letting me drive the forklift in the first place.
That's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, then go to another one, do it there too. No one checks. You're allowed to do it as many times as you want. If you've left a review in the past, you can do another one.
Just don't drive a forklift.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah. Or a tractor, agricultural tractor. If you've got no places, don't do it.
If you want to support
Just
the
leave
show,
a review for us instead.
best way to support the show is to jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of episodes going back years and years and years, as well as new stuff going forward. You could pay $10 a month. Those are US dollars, by the way.
Or if you want to learn how to do it, drive a tractor, then go and get a big trailer full of money and just dump it into our Patreon account. We won't say no
with
to
your
that.
tractor. Yeah. So you could give as much or as little in Patreon as you like, or nothing. You're always welcome.
Yep.
You could buy yourself cool merch of ours. You could get into spring. There's links in the show notes. You can go straight to that and get yourself some cool merch. They're the ways you can support us. If you want to get in contact with us, best way to do that is to jump into the Facebook discussion group. There's always interesting stuff going on in there. I've been thinking about doing lives in there, just going live periodically. I don't know. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea? I almost did it today.
I think it's a good idea.
I almost did it today because I had the live stream gear set up because I did the Patreon one. And then I was still set up and I was like, I wonder if I could go live in the group and talk about the South Australia thing and sort of show people my submission and go through like a bit of a follow the bouncing ball on how to do it. I might do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So this will be out by that time if I've done it. But yeah, I was thinking about going live and then, I can share the screen and be like, this is the legislation. This is the problematic bit. this is how you make a submission. Here's mine. Here's a template.
This is how you drive a tractor.
This is how you drive the tractor.
Yeah.
Because we need help with that thing. You know, if you haven't already submitted something to that South Australia IGP ban, you definitely should. That's the path. Unfortunately, that's the only thing. That's the only power we have.
Yep.
But you should be having your say.
And we should be unrooting the problem behind it.
Yeah,
that's existing within government. Allegedly.
I write to all these things whenever anybody wants to ban. I've written countless number of submissions on these things on behalf of myself. And when I was on the legislative committee of the ICP, I would then, write another one from their point of view. That's all you can do. Most of the time, it's like pointing out the downstream effects. The downstream effects of what will happen. But in this case, in South Australia, I think there's evidence of clear corruption. And I think that there's clearly a person who has done this. You can't claim that Bite Sports is making dogs dangerous and increasing bite statistics when there's one IGP club and it has about 10 people in it, and there's no evidence that any of their dogs have ever done anything to come up on the radar. So that, to me, reeks of corruption, and that's why we all need to be fighting that.
That's why I'm saying we need to follow these things through, and just the apathy of letting it go.
Yeah, you can't pay lip service to this stuff.
That should be rooted out. The person who has politically motivated this, they need to be named and shamed.
That's right. And this is one of the things, like I see a lot of people posting on Facebook about that, and that's great for spreading the word, but you have to make those submissions. Like just knowing about it, being angry about it, and yelling into an empty hallway is not going to actually get it changed. You've got to actually start using the due process. That's how we can actually get these things changed.
But do it the way Friendly Geordies do. Like find the information, like find the breadcrumb trail. Because with all of these people, they leave skeletons in the closet, and they don't want you to find them.
I don't think there's been any attempt to cover this up at all. It's pretty obvious.
But this is the thing. I think what people need to do is actually go after them. And I'm not saying in a malicious, dangerous, or threatening manner. What I am saying is politically go after them.
Yeah.
Anything that you can unravel about them, like bring it to the forefront. Let people start seeing.
Most people listening, that's unachievable. What you can do is write your submission. You must do that. All right, we've got to keep wrapping it up. So Facebook discussion group, do that. If you want to shoot us an email, you can get in touch with us that way. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. I love you. Goodbye.